Chapter 14. Brownout. Larry and the Chief never make it into the sewers. The first sign of trouble comes in the form of a large truck speeding down the road toward them. The Chief swerves to avoid a head-on collision and sounds the siren on instinct. Larry expects her to turn around and follow the vehicle, but she casually flips off the siren and continues southward, accelerating by no more than 5 or 10 mph. Larry watches the truck in the rearview mirror as it disappears around a bend. "You're gonna let that asshole go?" he asks. "I'm more interested in what he's running from," says the Chief. "Look." She points ahead through the windshield. It's an Exodus. Several other vehicles speed past them, though less recklessly than the first, and the sidewalks are dotted with frantic pedestrians. They spot a group of teenagers hurrying down the right-hand sidewalk, and Isaacs pulls up alongside them. Larry rolls down his window and calls out, flashing his badge. To Larry's surprise, the teens all share a look of relief when they see it, and they all step up to the window. "Everything all right?" he asks, wishing there was some world where the answer was, "Yes, it's Jogathon. There's free pizza at the end if you want to join." Of course, none of the kids look like they've been promised pizza today. A scrawny boy with dirty clothes puts himself at the front of the group. "Do you have any guns?" he asks. Larry glances at the faces of the other teens. No sign of hidden laughter or annoyance to suggest that this kid is pulling a goof. They all just stare in anticipation. Larry counters the boy's question with one of his own. "What have you seen?" One of the others lets out a long, humorless laugh. Larry finds it surreal, seeing someone actually exhibit signs of hysteria before his eyes. The absurdity of it almost makes him want to start laughing himself, but he redirects his attention. The scrawny kid meets his gaze and begins to explain. He starts by saying that the plumbing's been acting up lately, but Larry stops him. "No need for a prologue," he says. "Just tell us what you're running from so we know what we're running into." He senses the boy's trepidation and adds, "Pretend what you're saying doesn't make you sound insane. Any intel you have will make our jobs a hell of a lot easier." The boy nods and focuses, seemingly emboldened by a sense of duty. "There's shit everywhere," he begins. "And monsters. I mean, like mutant squids or something. Government experiments, maybe? I don't know what they are, but they look like they belong at the bottom of the ocean. Spikes and suckers, weird frilly things, fins, works. Me and Vince saw one a couple days ago, so I knew something was coming." He turns to his friend. "You didn't believe me. You gotta owe me a candy bar or something." Larry whistles loudly, causing the boy to spin back around in surprise. "You can brag about your incredible foresight later. Right now I need someone who's taking their ADHD meds to tell us what's going on before someone gets killed up there." The boy shrinks away from the window, some of his goofball facade breaking to reveal the fear underneath. Larry's heart twists a little, but he holds tighter to his own mask and stares. "Palladino," says the Chief from the driver's seat. "The kid told us what to expect. Sewage and monsters just like we thought." She leans forward to make eye contact with the boy and smiles. "Thank you, you've been a lot of help." She's about to put the car in drive when the kid says, "Wait." Isaac takes her hands off the wheel and looks back. "Who's this guy?" says the kid. "I don't know what his deal was, but he didn't seem scared at all. Almost happy, even." One of the others says something inaudible. "What was that?" the Chief asks the mumbler.
"I said I think he was talking to him," she responds. "Like he was one of them."
"I thought he was controlling him," says another. "Didn't you see his dog?" Larry interjects. "What'd the man look like?"
"I didn't get a good look, but he wore glasses and a nice suit," says the girl. "And he did have a dog with him. It looked like it had a tumor on its back."
"More like he was half tumor," says the scrawny kid. "Like one of the squids that attached to his body, maybe?" asks Larry. The girl nods emphatically. "Was there anyone else with him?"
"I don't think so."
"Anything else you can tell us?" They all think for a moment before finally shaking their heads. "Thanks for your help," he says. Once they're back on the road, Isaacs turns to Larry. "That professor from the college," she asks, "does he have a dog?" Larry shakes his head. "I really wouldn't know." The Chief nods silently, brow furrowed at the road. Larry follows her gaze through the windshield to a sporadic stream of citizens trickling out from the south end of town. He can't put his finger on it, but something about the way they flee doesn't sit quite right with him. Some are running, many seem rightly terrified, but a large number of them are just strolling casually or even stopping to take a rest, chatting about this or that as if reality wasn't currently bending at the seams behind them. "They don't know where they want to go," he says out loud. "Disjointed," murmurs the Chief, still frowning. Larry shakes his head and says nothing, still watching them. Before long, the smell starts to creep into the car. That same familiar aroma of rotten cabbage and old blood, but amplified and twisted through the deep bouquet of collected human waste. They've stored a pair of gas masks in the glove box for this very purpose, and they retrieve them now, hurriedly strapping them on before the dizzying perfume settles into their sinuses. Even through the mask, that awful smell of decay still digs into his nostrils, but Larry forces himself to breathe. And then they hear the singing of the flesh. An alien symphony of chirrups and drones. Demented and dissonant like the hoots and warbles of the dryad, but wholly wider in range and spectrum. It sounds like there are hundreds of them. Remembering what happened the other day when Ben first encountered the dryad, and all the delirious people they've passed along the roadside, Larry finds himself deeply regretting not having pocketed a couple of earplugs before getting into the car. To think that they could meet their ends here if not for a couple of pieces of foam rubber. As they turn left up the next road, they find themselves in awe of what lays before them. The gutters run brown with sludge. Great pools of sewage bubble up from the drains and under doorways, filling up stairwells and steep lawns before flowing out into the streets, gurgling and sloshing rhythmically as if being pumped from below. All throughout the newly formed wetlands, a menagerie of fleshy abominations frolics and squirms in the fetid waters. Purple and scarlet tangles of tumor drag themselves through the muck with gnarled muscle roots, some nestling their way into soggy ground, others submerging themselves in water or just basking in the sun. Isaac stops the car so they can observe. There are long, ill-looking tentacles trailing through the deeper pools, too long to know where one begins and the other ends, nor whether they attach to anything at the bottom. One of them launches into the air, deftly wrapping itself around a seagull and dragging it into the deep brown. The chief points out a collection of mutant masses behind a garbage can. Larry looks to see a family of enormous, carpentary-infected rats. There must be at least 8 of them. He watches one begin to crawl away from the mass, but it can't. They're all stuck together like plastic toys left out in the sun. They don't seem too bothered by their situation, happily dragging soggy leftovers from a torn sack of garbage and sharing the morsels among themselves. "Rat King," says the chief. "That's a sign of good luck." Larry finds that impossible to believe, but swallows it anyway. They'll have to turn around soon, and even if they make it out alive, they'll have to come back eventually. And they could use all the luck they can get. Isaac takes out a camcorder and begins filming the scene. Larry almost chokes when his stone-faced, no-nonsense mentor of 6 years begins throwing down her best David Attenborough impression. "As you can see here, the tentacled freaks have totally overrun this human settlement. In time, they will consume all life in the city, and then the continent, and eventually the entire planet." She flashes Larry a wide grin behind her mask, which quickly fades into a look of horror as she realizes how she's acting. At least, that's what Larry thinks look means, until the chief points over his shoulder through the passenger side window. Larry turns to see a small figure near one of the houses about a block down the street. He squints. Something small and familiar is wandering through the muck and blasphemous biology. A boy. Larry lets out a gibber and immediately reaches for the door handle, but Isaac grabs his hand. Larry turns to protest, but the chief just shakes her head, the stoic look returning to her face where it belongs. They both look back out the window. It's just a little kid, wandering half-dazed along the side of the house, casually splashing his foot in the surrounding puddles. There don't seem to be any manifestations of the flesh in the kid's vicinity, but their view is greatly obscured by the nearby houses. There's no way to tell for sure. Larry hears a click and turns to see Isaac's readying her gun. She locks eyes with him and nods hesitantly, indicating, "Go on, be quick, I'll cover you." He pauses for a second, wondering if there might be a better way to go about this, when he hears a jarring clang, the Rat King having knocked over one of his trash cans. Who still uses metal garbage cans? The more distractible part of Larry's mind wonders. He ignores the thought and uses the noise to push himself out of the car and onto the soaked pavement. He focuses attention on the child down the street, still playing in the stagnant pools of sewage. Larry steps forward, briskly but quietly, until he's close enough to get the boy's attention. "Psst!" he tries to whisper-shout. The boy looks up, but doesn't see him. Larry waves his hand, but the kid misses it, returning to his invisible game. Larry double-checks the surroundings and moves a bit closer. This time, he shouts, "Kid!" The boy looks up at him, disinterested. He appears to be affected by whatever the rest of the citizens were. Larry hopes he can get through to him nevertheless. He motions urgently for the boy to follow him, but the boy just tilts his head curiously to one side. Larry sighs, exasperated. He decides to try the white van strategy. He steps close enough for the boy to hear him at a normal volume and says, "I'm a friend of your mother's. She sent me to come get you." The child stares dully, but Larry can see the rusty cogs turning behind the glazed gray eyes. Something clicks and the boy points to Larry's bandaged ear. "Bite," he says. "Yeah," says Larry, taken aback. "Now come with me, it's not safe." Something clicks for Larry. Why did the kid point out the bite, and how did he know that it was a bite at all? He steps back from the kid. "What's my name?" The boy answers readily.
"Your name is Larry, go figure."
A lump rises in Larry's throat. His stomach flops into his groin like a dead fish. He says a silent prayer and rests a hand on his hip. The boy's dull eyes follow the hand. Larry's eyes follow in turn, realizing that the hand has rested instinctively on his gun. The boy looks back up at Larry and stares. A few things flash through the officer's mind. In a nanosecond, his options have been weighed and a decision reached. He crouches down, takes a deep breath, and removes the gas mask, covering his nose with the collar of his undershirt. He then runs forward, quickly straps the mask around the child's face, and lifts him over his shoulder, running back to the car. Larry opens the door to the back seat, slaps a pair of handcuffs around the boy's wrist and to the door handle before hopping into the front seat. The chief doesn't bother to ask for any kind of explanation. She puts the car in gear and drives cautiously out of the putrid swamp.